Hello.
When your mind is
Is it the Premier League next Saturday then? Start of it or Friday?
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed, Charles.
Good evening, Graham. Good evening, Anthony. And welcome on Sunday.
Hamilton.
Just back from the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Always one of the most joyful places you can spend a time of day, any time of day. Well, any time of day that you're allowed in there. And on a sunny, beautiful day like today, with the sheep all nuzzling around everybody, and it's just the most gorgeous place. You can't call it a hidden gem because lots of people know about it, but
And also, it's gigantic.
it is.
So
And that's
gem,
and that and
gem
that's
sounds like it should be small,
yeah,
and it's
and it's
huge.
anything
It's a
but.
huge
It's
estate.
huge. It's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah.
And
And
yet,
it's got a huge.
it never feels crowded or over busy, and it just suits one and all.
Well, that's
So,
because the indoor galleries, even
mm,
though they're good, and the shop and the
mm,
cafe and the restaurant, there's so much
mm.
sculpture park and so much great landscaping and so many great sculptures dotted around a huge space that you never get everybody cramming into the galleries because most people are outdoors.
Taking exercise with visual joys. Well, we talked in detail last week about the pleasures of sculpture parks, and I think it's fair to say that Yorkshire Sculpture Park reigns supreme within that. So we won't, reflect further on that, but just a reminder to everybody. There's, I mean, since I was last there, 3 new exhibitions have opened there, so it was a wonderful opportunity to catch up with a
It
lot of
is. It is
artwork
definitely
today.
the best sculpture park in Britain.
Bar none, and absolutely right. Now, Graham, to some extent, we're going to be looking backwards here, I think, this week as our lead topic. And it might be predictable that men who are now into their 60s might be thinking, oh, films were better in the past. But actually, to back up the evidence of this, one watches these films. And it isn't, interestingly, I think, just our own age group that actually is taking the pleasure in discovering films from the past. I'm not calling it a huge trend, but there is a sense, I think, that people are beginning to appreciate the wonders of the past in filmmaking. I think that's partly because if you look at the summer season of films, you're just not going to get stimulated or excited by it. You're not. These are not films that are going to be memorable much more than the length of time it takes to eat the popcorn, are they? So
No, but
instead,
what I'm talking about is films which were mainstream in the
yeah,
past and how good films are still made. Great films are still made.
yes.
This year you had
Zone of
Zone of
interest,
Interest,
for
and
example.
you also had Poor Things, or is it Poor
Yes.
Thing? And although I didn't actually understand what the point of Poor Thing was, although it was brilliantly made
Mm,
and very inventive. But so these are great films, but they're not mainstream films. They're not seen by a wide audience.
no,
Whereas
no.
until maybe 20 years ago or so, mainstream films could be intelligent and very artistic
Mm,
and be mainstream, and that doesn't seem to happen much anymore. And I realized this when I watched 2 films recently in the late 70s, which you wouldn't expect to make that point. So I watched Manhattan by Woody Allen, which came out in 1979, and I also watched John Landis's Animal House with John Belushi, which came out in 1978. In both films, show how Hollywood has changed.
Talk me through that, Graham. In what ways would you highlight the changes in Hollywood? I mean, there's significant filmmakers. Obviously, Woody Allen, by that stage, he was on a hot streak of filmmaking, it's fair to say, at that point, and was pretty much it was essential. And Woody Allen film came out, you had to see it. John Landis's work with Animal House, maybe, I mean, you say mainstream, but at that point, Belushi was, well, how well known was Belushi at that point? Was Blues Brothers was the other end of that, wasn't it? It was afterwards, wasn't it?
That was John Lance's next film. He made
Yeah.
Blues Brothers, then he made Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, which was a huge
Yes.
hit and a
Yeah.
very good film.
Mm. But
But
you
the
would
thing is
still
that,
you'd still
yeah,
qualify Animal House as being mainstream.
completely, because it wasn't regarded as a intellectual film.
No, no, no,
In
no.
fact, in fact, it was blamed for terrible, gross out comedies like Porky's that came along in the 80s after it. Although I
Yeah.
think Animal House is a different class to Porky's, because Animal House is really a combination of American Graffiti, which is a
Yeah.
huge hit in '73, set in school days, in the early 60s.
In the
And
early
it's a
60s, yeah.
cross, ironically, it's a cross with Lindy Anderson's If, about a revolt inside a British public school, which was made in
Yeah.
1968. It came
Yeah.
out in 1968. It's a cross of that. So it's actually, although it's a comedy, although it's a bit silly, although it's a bit vulgar, it's got a huge intelligence. The characterization, the dialogue, the ideas behind the dialogue, they're not just gags, there's ideas there, are all really intelligent. And it went on to influence, lots of other films in the future.
Mm.
And it had Donald Trump in it, who's very good. And I thought, well, this film was regarded as not being a serious film, and yet it actually, compared to films that are made now by Hollywood, is a really intelligent, clever film. And it was a huge hit. And the same with Woody Allen's Manhattan, which is even more intellectual. Well, I
Yeah.
say even more. I mean, obviously it's more intellectual than
Yes.
Mouse. But when you watch it now, it looks like some highbrow art house film that would be seen by about 20 people in Britain, and that'd be it. Because it's just super intelligent, super smart, super sophisticated, super adult, brilliantly made, brilliantly acted. And
Well,
the
Graham,
main
the other
character,
thing,
yeah,
both these films are bloody funny.
exactly, yeah, it's still funny as well. That's the amazing thing. And one of the things that struck me about watching Manhattan again after all these years is the main characters who gather for, glasses of wine and lunches and
Mm.
dinners, cafes
Mm.
and restaurants in New York, and they're all in the writing or academic milieu. And
Yeah.
Woody Allen is going out with he's a comedy writer. He's going out with a 17-year-old girl who's about to graduate, and she's actually more adult than he is. He's portrayed as a bit of an idiot when it comes to like being an adult and being in relationships. And she comes out completely on top in the film. But the interesting thing is that when they're all meeting to talk, what
Yeah.
they talk about are really intellectual, deep subjects
Mm.
about politics and philosophy. Now, that was a mainstream hit. These days, I don't remember seeing any films that are mainstream hits where the characters have any intellectual conversations whatsoever. And in fact, I don't remember any of my friends having intellectual conversations in bars anymore. It's almost like the Western world has become more dumb since the late 1970s and 80s.
So it's not the done thing to have intelligent conversations anymore.
Well, not about philosophy and politics and things that are deep, not deep conversations. You can talk about anything you want, obviously, and everybody does, but the level of discussion in Manhattan between the main characters when they're in a
Mm.
cafe or a restaurant is way above the level of anything these days
But Graham,
outside of. Hmm,
one of the things
yeah,
that strikes me with that is how much actually was it that Woody Allen was part of a cognoscenti, as it were, that was intellectual, and actually he happened to strike with humor that made it more appealing for those who might not be the cognoscenti. And I just wonder that in our times now, well, one thing strikes straight away. I don't think the story of Woody Allen going out with a 17-year-old girl would be being made right now. And I'm talking about Woody of the age that he was then. I'm not sure we would even have a film that would let that be happening now, because we're in different times, and maybe that would be seen as something
I was
that
worried about that before. I was worried about that before I watched it again because I thought, oh, this
Mm.
could appear to be totally inappropriate
Mm.
and come across as like, ugh, uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
the characterization and the brilliant acting by Marielle Hemingway, who's the best
Yeah.
thing in it, even though the rest of the
Yes.
cast,
Yeah.
including
Yeah.
Dan,
Yeah.
Meryl's super fantastic. But Marielle Hemingway is fantastic in it. She basically makes the film real and
Mm.
gives it emotional weight. Really, she's just fantastic. Well, you don't have any. It's not uncomfortable at all because
No.
Woody is made to look the idiot. Idiot. She's made to look the adult
Yeah.
who is entirely in the relationship for good reasons, and
Yeah.
he's the one who's down himself and eventually comes a cropper. So no, it totally works. I agree that the headlines would be bad, obviously, but if you actually watch the film, I'm sure you wouldn't have any of those negative thoughts that
I
come
just
to you.
suspect that with woke sensibility, and I hate that expression woke, but with sensibilities as they are now, I can't even see studios agreeing to have that kind of film made anymore.
You're possibly correct, but at the time, mainstream Hollywood was much more intelligent and arty than mainstream Hollywood is now,
So
or
why does
was.
that happen? I mean, why is endless money thrown at well, that's my bugbear, isn't it? I go on and on about the endless time after time versions of Marvel over and over again, and then sort of having successful characters from one franchise getting it on with a character from another franchise, so that it goes on and on and on and on and mutates into something else. But I mean, am I just somewhat joyless that I can't see why people are so fixated into this modern world which isn't the real world, which doesn't reflect the real world.
That's a whole new kind of worms there. It's basically a complete cultural shift from the 60s, 70s,
Yeah,
and even through the 80s and 90s. And in Woody Allen's case, he wasn't an outsider, he was an insider. He was a mainstream comedy writer from the early
yes,
60s onwards. He wasn't like an arty person.
no,
He was a funny guy, and he was successful. But he was influenced by European directors like Bergman and Fellini.
yeah,
And what's changed now is that someone who was mainstream and not an outsider in those days was influenced by really intelligent
mm,
filmmaking and by ideas that were intelligent ideas in a way that mainstream just isn't anymore. And then the reason the 70s was so good was because in the 60s, with the new wave of European filmmaking and the
mm.
sort of like Hollywood, Hollywood had semi surrendered to the new generation of filmmakers. And that the impact of that, which led to directors like Scorsese and Spielberg coming along, the impact of that was still lingering. So in those days, Hollywood wasn't totally dominated by people who looked on anything vaguely intelligent as being some sort of like ridiculous notion that you never make money out of, in a way that it later became. And even in the 80s, you still had people like Bernardo Bertolucci and Tarkovsky and Scorsese making very good films that were mainstream hits. So the 60s new wave had a long tail to it, which lasted a good 30 years. And that all ended in the 90s and the noughties. And then obviously the last 20 years is, it's so ancient history, it has no impact whatsoever. And Hollywood's gone back to type, which is that if the cow's got milk, you carry on milking it. So as long as all these fairly awful Marvel films keep on making money, they'll keep on making them.
I'm trying to think, when was the last intelligent, humorous film made?
There was a hit, a big hit.
Yeah,
Well, there's not, comedies have been sort of slightly squeezed out of the Hollywood program of film releases these
yeah.
days. That the occasional comedy comes out, usually involving Ryan Gosling, but they're not huge hits. They're just mild hits. And
Mm,
even things like National Lampoon's vacation films are long ago. Even films with Will Ferrell, like the Anchorman,
mm.
that's a long time ago as well. So that
It
whole
is. It is.
whole wave of comedies that had some intelligence to them just doesn't happen anymore.
And
It's
even Barbie was ultimately a film that was trying to take itself seriously.
exactly. Well, yeah, that had intelligence. May not agree with the outcome of all the intelligence, but it certainly wasn't a stupid film, and it was a big hit.
Emasculated men.
Yeah, let's not go back to that one again. There is no good end result from any discussion starting with that phrase.
So, by contrast, on television, there is loads of comedy made, loads and loads of comedy still being made.
Well,
Now,
that's because it's now easier to reach an audience through streaming
yes,
and terrestrial for comedy than it is in the movies. The
mm,
movies, because of the competition from streaming, Hollywood has now retreated to the safest bets all the time because there's so much competition from streaming, it can't afford to have flops. So it doesn't bother trying anymore, I don't think.
so we have sci-fi, we have thrillers, endless murder cases, and not a lot of comedy. Interesting.
Well, we don't have this. If you're talking about film releases on screens as opposed to streaming, we
Mm,
don't have that many. We don't have that many thrillers anymore, or that many
no.
sci-fi films. It's mainly
Fantasy. We have
fantasy
fantasy.
films.
Loads of
The
fantasy.
mainstream now is boiled down to ch ch children's and children's and families
Yeah.
animated films, which can
Yeah.
be a comedy,
The
and
Despicable
fantasy
Me's.
films,
Mm,
and superhero films. Those are the three the genres have been hoovered up
mm,
by the streaming channels.
mm. I mean, maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe Despicable Me has humor in it. Maybe that's they're up to Despicable Me 4 now, I think, aren't they?
I think they're too formulaic. All these things like
Yeah.
the worst
Yeah.
of Hollywood are a formula, and really hate formulas unless they're really brilliant versions of formulas, which occasionally you do get that. But in general, it's the same thing over and again. It's the same style of humor, the same content, the same characterization, the same animation, the same ideas. And so it's just formulaic, formulaic.
I'd say Toy
Formulaic.
Story, the series Toy Story seemed to buck that. I think that Toy
That's a bit
Story,
better, yeah. Toy
that
Story
was
was
still the last of the Toy Stories was arguably the best of the whole series, I thought.
Well, that's a rarity, though, sadly.
So, Graham, there we go. The strength of mainstream films from the 1970s. Can't recommend enough, actually, to go back for people to look at Woody Allen's work in particular and enjoy the benefits of that. It's time, Graham, for an interruption.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying we're looking forward to go to the Edinburgh International Film Festival.
Setting off on Tuesday evening, yes.
And there's so many good things, and there's two things I'm looking for the most of all. First of all, Mark Cousins will be in conversation with Hannah McGill, former. Yeah. They're actually both former international directors, and he'll be talking on Wednesday afternoon at the Edinburgh International Book Festival about his latest book, which is Dear Orson Welles and Other Essays, which is about Mark's thoughts on various filmmakers and films. So looking forward to that. And then the Q&A keynote address by director Alex Garland of Civil War fame with Andrew MacDonald, the producer of Trainspotting. Yes. That's coming up as well during the film festival itself. And we're looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, well, we shall be reflecting on that in the next recording that we make. So can't wait. I'm looking forward to this season's festival more than ever, actually. And it's a great joy that looks potentially to be the best film festival in quite some time. Graham, this week has been interesting for public art, street art, and perhaps the most famous of all street artists, albeit the mystery figure, Banksy, who's done a series of works. I've enjoyed the way that we are now on day 7, the latest work, day 7, and the latest work has been applied to a police sentry, which were used in the 1990s in particular in order to keep an eye on potential IRA bombers, etc., in London. So this is the 7th in the series, and so interestingly, it's been investigated already by the police, and some joyless leading policeman has described the work of Banksy as criminal damage, which is a typical policeman's response to actually making a sentry that's largely pointless now, because I don't think they're used in the way that they used to be. It's a lovely way to have done it, actually. It's rather more lovely. Also, I think it gives off...
It's not totally lovely, Charles. It's not totally lovely because it's actually piranhas. The fish that he's painted so well inside this see-through glass police box in London are actually...
It's still lovely to look, Graham, although it's piranhas, it's still lovely to look at, and then comes the bite that it's piranhas.
Exactly.
So it's been really interesting, the coverage through the week, how this has developed, and it got interestingly, out of the first 6, we've had one that was stolen, which was the Howling Wolf. We've had one that was, well, to call it defaced is a bit harsh, I suppose, the 2 elephants, where one of them's now had white stripes painted on it. And then the one that within, again, a matter of hours of being put in position, the one that was on the billboard, which was the giant cat, was removed by some contractors who said, well, we were going to be removing this billboard anyway, so we're just going ahead with that a bit early and removing this. And they've taken it to some yard wherever the contractors have, and they've spoken to one chap who was there, who said if he wants to collect it, fine, but otherwise it's going in the skip, which is an interesting response to art. And I think at this point, so we had defaced, we had stolen, and we had removed. And it struck me that I was just looking at the further progress, because the rhythm at that stage reminded me of the deaths of Henry VIII's 6 wives. And I was kind of wondering where it would go next. But it looks like so far we've got maybe 4 survivors, but there's always time for something else to happen. I thought what was interesting is how it was seen as perfectly all right to go and steal it, perfectly all right to go and paint on it in white, and perfectly all right to remove it with absolutely no thought about the fact that people were enjoying it, and just on the grounds that, well, we're contractors and we remove things.
Yeah, no, but this is
how do
exactly
you
what
react? How
Banksy is
do you react to
about.
that?
But this Banksy won't complain about that because that's
No.
what Banksy is about.
Yes.
Banksy likes to point out the hypocrisy, double standards, and strangeness of modern life, modern society, modern politics.
Yes.
So the fact that he's done the police sometimes, but the fact that people reacted to that by stealing it, defacing
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and these are criminal acts in themselves.
Yes.
So if he's committed a criminal act, the reaction of the public to his criminal act has in itself been criminal. In a week in which we've had riots, far
Yes.
right riots and violence
Yes.
across towns and
Yes.
city in England, and
Yes.
it's instructive that Banksy's latest set of street arts turned up during that riot week, and they're all animals. So
Yeah.
there must be a reason for this. Banksy doesn't. Banksy's art makes a point. He doesn't do art just to be pretty
No.
or even shocking. He does it to make a point. So there must be a point in this. The only trouble is, for once in Banksy's life, I can't be sure what the point is. Can you
And
work
he's
out the
not
point,
given
Charles?
any of the
What's
works
the
a
meaning?
title. So they've been anonymous works, and so far it's been interesting to have the different interpretations that's come about. Some have talked about exactly what you've mentioned. Is it a new London zoo of animals, but actually reflecting human behaviour? Some have seen connections with climate change. Some have seen connection with Gaza. So various things have been read into it. It's interesting with art always that if you actually put a statement with it, are you limiting the potential impact of the art? And I partly ask that because at the exhibition that I've been to at the Sculpture Park today, it seemed to me to be very necessary to read up about the reasons behind the art being made. I think some works do need the explanations. I think others, it's more interesting just to trust the
I
viewer
don't
to make
like
their own thoughts.
explanations. If the artwork doesn't work without an explanation, it's not
Yeah.
good. It's
Yeah.
not good enough. It hasn't done its job. And with Banksy before, you didn't need to know the title to know what it meant. Points were patently obvious. I hate art where you read the interpretation board and it's really interesting. Then you look at the actual work of art and it's much less interesting than when you read about it. Because
Yeah.
the meaning of it isn't there.
No.
The meaning that's on the board isn't there in the art. And that's why they've got the board in the first place. So that to me is just artistic failure. So I like Banksy because he has got a point, but this one is quite hard to decipher. So is he saying that in the week of the riots that the animals have come out and are taking over the streets and the city, which is a bit sort of negative and a bit, linked to the riots? Is it something more positive that he's basically showing that mankind isn't divorced from the animal kingdom and shouldn't be, and that the world of animals and wildlife and nature deserves to be in the heart of the town, the city as well? Is it a climate change or environmental point? Or is it something entirely different? I don't know. It's quite obtuse.
What about the sites that he's chosen within London, the choices that he's made, the different places within London that he has picked out to have these 7 images in? It's very much a cross-section of London.
Yeah, he tends to do that. He seems to pick, he does pick political locations, like he's done one on the wall dividing, I think, the West Bank and Israel.
Yeah.
So he does pick locations for political reasons sometimes, but other times he picks locations that suit the artwork, that fit in, because quite often, as you know, his street art is linked to the area around him directly, and the art only works entirely if it's in that location, on that wall, or on that river, or on that embankment, or on that billboard. So it's not always a political meaning. It's not always choosing a location for a particular reason, except it fits with the art he's doing. With this one, I can't see that's what the point is about. It'd be nice to think that it's just Banksy being positive and basically he's just painting nice pictures of animals to brighten everything up. But the fact that the most recent one, which is the piranhas in the police box, suggests that he's still got ideas behind it, no matter whatever those are. I mean, piranhas in the police box is not just pretty. There's something beyond pretty going on there.
I agree. But even with the very first one, the fact that there's the rocks are falling, so it's precarious. That message is not just a pretty image, of course. And even having three monkeys in the way they are, they didn't necessarily look playful. It might have been on the, might have been on the run from a burning wood, from burning jungle or whatever. That potential. So I thought it was interesting in terms of the utilitarian spaces being used. So you've got, for example, a billboard. You've got a satellite dish. You've got painted over windows that have been bricked out and then painted over. So the kind of spaces that are chosen, or indeed just using for the line of the monkeys that he just picked out on the concrete that they could be seen to be hanging from. That was interesting. I mean, I guess that is what defines street art anyway. You react to the space that, you make use of what's there. But even those choices I thought was interesting. To go with a billboard that's obviously absolutely impermanent and is likely to be gone, to take a satellite dish that was removed within a matter of hours, easy to dislodge from its position. What do you read into that?
I'm not sure. I'm not actually that bothered about that, although it may be part of the meaning. I think you might have hit part of the nail on the head with animals fleeing and animals perhaps more in jeopardy than look. It could be a reference to animals in trouble because of mankind, and it could be that therefore a reference obliquely to the far right writers and the idiots who've been doing all this violence. So it could be that. So, and if it is that, perhaps the locations do have some relevance. But I really can't be sure what the meaning is, but it does definitely mean something because it's Banksy.
Well, we shall see if he does make a statement at all. I mean, the seventh work, as we say, has gone up today. We're recording this on Sunday evening, on the 11th of August. Graham, there's Banksy for us. Now, this is a troubling thought. When the ideas come through, Graham Chalmers, my idea for a play. Not entirely serious. I'm quite disappointed if it's not entirely serious. I think I'm always, they always tell a journalist there's a book in every journalist. I'm not convinced about that. And interestingly, I'm not equally convinced that there's a play in everybody. But Graham, maybe there is. Yeah. So why have you suddenly got this idea for a play?
I'm sure there is a book or a play in everybody or every journalist. The question is whether it's a good play or a good book. That's the problem. Well, when I met Dave Turner, who starred in Ken Loach's last film, The Old Oak, Dave was actually, I think he's a union man in the fire brigade, and he'd run a pub and lived in that area of the Durham former mining villages that Ken set The Old Oak in. And that film's about racism, right-wing racism, and working class misguided anger towards immigrants. So it's very relevant to this week as The Old Oak. And Dave Turner is a great bloke, and he came to the Harrogate Odeon thanks to Harrogate Film Society for a screening of the film recently. And I chatted to him afterwards, and it was really interesting about how he worked on the set, because he's not an actor, and yet he was the start, the leading character in the whole film, and working with Ken, what Ken was like. And I thought, because he's considers himself to be a friend of Ken Loach's, and I thought, a play called A Friend of Ken's. So I got the title, A Friend of Ken's. And it's about an actor who isn't an actor from that background, like Dave Turner, who assumes before he goes on set that Ken Loach is a working class hero and everything's improvised. And he goes on set and discovers that Ken's actually quite a hard taskmaster, and that he makes you do 45 takes of scenes quite often. So it's about how he's a bit sort of shocked by what the real Ken's like. But then as the shooting of the film goes along, the main character, the friend of Ken's, discovers that Ken is just like that because he wants to make great films, and he's actually a really nice bloke all around and really supportive. And then he discovers that Ken's in trouble because of something to do with anti-Semitism. And so the actor sets out to try and rescue from the precarious situation that Ken's actually get himself trapped in. And so I thought, if I could write plays, which I very much cannot write plays, I could make a play at that.
What distinguishes on a very basic level, an ability to write a play versus someone who can't, even though they can be good with words.
Well, it's a different skill, but writing a play is not the same as writing a comedy, which isn't the same
Exactly.
as writing a novel, which isn't the same as
Exactly.
writing a film. So therefore, you can't just be a writer, full stop,
Mm.
and go, "Oh, I'm just going to write a play." You'd have to
Mm.
study how plays work. I mean, plays work in a different way, as you know, as a man who's seen so much theatre over
Yeah.
decades, in a complete different way to a film works, or
Yeah.
a radio show works, or a
Mm.
book works. So you'd have to study it. You couldn't just that. You'd have to be pretty damn good to just leap in and do a good play first time with no background in it.
I mean, the one thing that connects all that, Graham, though, is dialogue.
Well, that's the
All
good
those
thing because
art
I
forms, all
figured with
those
Dave
art
Turner,
forms,
that,
they all require
yeah,
good dialogue.
dialogue very important. Yeah, it's it's a bit less important than novel, though it still is very very important. But yeah, you're right. In radio, obviously, and in well, films these days, there's so much visual action going on that they
Mm.
seem to have lost that of dialogue in mainstream Hollywood to a large degree, sadly. I mean, when you see When Harry Met Sally now, that rom-com
Yeah.
from the '80s, influenced by Woody Allen's Manhattan,
Yeah.
it looks like like you know, a masterclass compared to
Mm.
what you get now from Hollywood.
Mm. That's an interesting thought that dialogue is not as important in novels. Why do you say that? Because surely when the characters spin off each other through dialogue, and writers often say that characters take over, and I think dialogue is often a testimony to that, or testament to that, I should say.
Most novels succeed on narrative, emotions, and ideas. You do get some novels where the character's dialogue is very memorable. For example, the Graduate film of 1967 with Anne Bancroft and Dustin Hoffman. The book
Yeah.
is fairly similar in large chunks of the dialogue in the film, which is full of memorable lines. The movie The Graduate, great,
Mm-hmm.
great dialogue. Large chunks of that dialogue comes straight from the book. But if you read other books, like, you know, I've read some Ian McEwan recently, Martin Amis, very good books. I don't remember a single line from either book because none of the dialogue serves a purpose of explaining what the character thinks and moving the story along. But the dialogue isn't particularly memorable in itself. That they're not great lines like Shakespeare's great lines that are going to be remembered forever. So you can write a very good novel, which is very successful, where the dialogue merely serves a purpose and
Mm.
isn't memorable itself. And that happens all the time.
Well, that's a fair response. I'm not going to challenge the logic of what you say there at all. I guess you're right. I mean, I've seen films even more than I've seen, sorry, plays even more than I've seen films. And it is absolutely true to say, obviously, that dialogue is so essential and how it's used in plays. One thinks of the different ways that can be done, the way that Pinter introduced pauses and the power of the pause. Now, I'm not talking cat scratch fever here. I'm talking what I'm about to do now. Pause. You're absolutely right. I mean, okay. I know you're going at me about going on about Acheborn, but if you want to testify how dialogue works, you watch an Alan Acheborn play, which has full of ideas going on underneath it all, but it's guided by the force of witty dialogue.
Yeah. Aching for Acheborn. I think I'd call your book.
Aching for Acheborn. Dear,
Yes.
oh dear. Anyway, we'll be returning to Alan Acheborn later in the year when his 90th, and you heard that correctly, Alan's 90th play is coming to the Stephen Joseph Theatre in Scarborough in, I think, September. I'll be seeing that, and I'm looking forward to talking about that at the time, and you can just put up with that, Graham, whether you like it or not.
I will do. No, I'm only teasing about it. I know he's a genius.
So that's now, but that point about, where's narrative? Well, maybe going right back to our first discussion point then this evening, maybe we've hit on one of the problems for modern film, is that the narrative is not as good. The narrative quality, and therefore the dialogue quality, is being left behind by the need for the visual impact, and it's led all the time by bang bang boom boom effects, and not by the dialogue or indeed the narrative flow that goes with that. So what is it going to make and what's it going to take for mainstream Hollywood to see that actually those two tranches are as important as the visual?
Very sadly, until
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.